I'd like to welcome you to the Villanova Art Gallery, which is featuring an exhibition entitled Icon, The Way to the Kingdom. As you can see, the collection is divided into three sections. The first is the early church, the second will be the glory of Byzantium, and the third, Holy Rus. As we go inside the section entitled the early church, we're captured by this panorama scene of the First Council of Jerusalem, circa 50 AD, in which the apostles and the disciples decided the future of the church and opened up the church to the world, non-Gentile world. As you can see in this depiction, you have a bishop from the period, dressed in very simple garb. Alongside of that, you have an early desert father, probably from Egypt or Sinai, around that period. And of course, you have the depiction of St. Luke the Evangelist writing the first icon of the Mother of God. Now, in this section, we have items that go back to the 1st century AD. For example, inside this case, there are many relics and pieces of the bodies of some of the earliest saints of the church. And they are listed here accordingly, and on this side also. The icons that we have selected for this section deal mostly with Christ. As you can see, the icon painted without hands, which is considered the first icon, the Nativity of Christ. Then you have this most beautiful icon here of the life of Christ, known as the only begotten Son. Again, on this wall, you have the icon of Do Not Lament for Me, Mother, of the Virgin Mary holding her crucified Son in her hands. And then the icon, of course, Christ's crucifixion and his placing in the tomb, the epitaphis. Above that is the icon of the Blessed Silence, in which Christ is depicted not only as a high priest, but also with the wings of an archangel. And in this icon, which is known as the Paternity, it actually is the New Testament prefiguration of the Holy Trinity. And then on this last one, on this wall, you have a very old icon of the crucifixion in the center, surmounted by the 12 apostles. So on this wall, you would have icons that deal with Christ in the early days, his nativity, only begotten Son, which is his manifestation. And it's interesting, on this icon here, the icon painted without hands, they have two depictions concerning the two legends of this icon. The first is that the icon was presented to the Emperor of Edessa, Edessa, and on this medallion you have the icon better known as Veronica's veil in the Western Church, with Veronica wiping the brow of Christ as he is carrying his cross to Golgotha. So you have both depictions of the two legends, one from the east and one from the west. And in the center, the medallion, or this icon of Christ's head, is enclosed in this tabernacle in the city of Edessa. And what's interesting is the bright pink and fuchsia hues that are used to emphasize and outline this tabernacle. Now, if we look over at this icon here, this triptych, you'll see on the bottom layer, the triptych itself depicts the Ark of the Covenant, the actual Ark of the Covenant from the temple, the great temple of Jerusalem. And you see the high priest, the great ark in the center, surmounted by angels, and the angel protecting it. But again, now these two icons are about 4 centuries separated in time. Yet you see the same bright pink hues and fuchsia used to depict the actual Ark of the Covenant behind the Holy of Holies in the temple. And there you see a similar depiction of the medallion, the first icon, again in an ark, very similar in shape and style to the actual Ark of the Covenant, but this one in the city of Edessa. So these icons, even though there's 4 centuries that separate them, there is tremendous comparison between the two, and there's some sort of continuity. In the section on this side of the right-hand wall, you have the icon of the Old Testament Trinity, better known as the Hospitality of Abraham. And this is in a triptych, with the triptych carved as if it's a cupola, top of a church. And this one also is the Hospitality of Abraham. It is from Mount Athos. It's a very unusual depiction, a little more stranger than this, in that there are more figures involved. And again, you see here the Oak of Mamre, which is in the background. And this icon itself has a piece of the Oak of Mamre embedded in the back of it. On this side, we have the Transfiguration, a very old one, with Christ, Lord Almighty. And then way in the corner to the top, and the reason I put this here was because it's the early church section, but you have one of the early depictions of the Virgin of Jerusalem. Very often you see the Kazan Mother of God, you see the Mother of God of Smolensk, actually today the Kursk Mother of God, but very seldom do you see one depicting the Virgin of Jerusalem with the Holy Spirit within her bosom. And here are various relics of the early church. You can see St. Ephrem the Syrian. In here is St. John Damascus, St. John the Theologian, and St. John Chrysostom. In this case here, you have all 12 apostles and 4 evangelists, pieces of each in this beautiful box, and also 2 of the early disciples of the church. This, of course, is the icon of the Synaxis of the Archangels, celebrated on November 8th. And this, you have the hagiography, or the icon of the resurrection, the center surrounded by the 12 great feast days of the church. This is very similar in fact that it has the descent into Hades surrounded by the 12 great feast days, and then the life of Christ throughout all extra, another row of icons. So it's actually extended, and each one of them is enumerated with a different tropar or kondak going around it. And of course on the top you have Saint David the King, which of course he's holding the temple within his hand. So these icons all correlate to the early church, and this of course shows that the church started very early in time. By 50 AD, as you can see by the mural, already the church was being opened up not only to those who followed the Jewish law, but also to those who were a part of the Gentile world. Okay, we'll continue our journey. We have set up this little chapel in order to be able to have some of the miraculous icons that have been visiting us during this exhibition, so that they would have a proper place. The center icon that you see there is the icon of the Feodorovskaya Mother of God. It's the icon that was part of the imperial royal chambers in the Ekaterinsky Palace in Tsarskoye Selo, and most likely was the family icon that the children would probably pray before they went to bed. The Feodorovskaya icon itself is the imperial family's icon of the Mother of God. The reasoning for that is that, of course, when Michael I, the first Romanov, was coronated, the first Romanov Tsar, this icon was brought to the service, and after that the imperial family adopted this icon as their patronal icon of the Mother of God. This is why when a non-Russian Orthodox but member of the nobility would marry one of the Romanovs, they always seem to have the middle name Fyodorovna. For example, Alexandra Fyodorovna, Maria Fyodorovna. Their fathers were not Fyodor or Theodore. Actually, they had names like Christian and other names because they, of course, were Scandinavian or Germanic. But because they converted to Orthodox Christianity, they took the patronymic name of Theodore in honor of the Feodorovskaya Mother of God. So this is actually the last icon that the imperial family prayed before they were sent to Ekaterinburg. And on their journey, of course, they hadn't traveled with this icon. The icon to the right is the Blakirskaya Bozhe Materi, from the Church of the Blachernai in Constantinople. You know, there are many legends associated with this icon. The first, of course, in the 800s, 890, and the year 1000, the Avars and the barbarians tried to invade Constantinople. And this icon, the people of Constantinople went to the Church of the Blachernai to pray before this icon, and then they took her out of this church and marched around the entire perimeter of the city, praying to the Mother of God and entreating her to help and protect the city. What was interesting about it is the service known as the Akafist. The Akafist came from this actual procession around the city of Constantinople. There were several of these icons that were found in Russia. The original, of course, was brought in 1654 from the holy mountain of Athos. It was taken out of Mount Athos for protection and taken to Russia, where hopefully it would be safe from the invading Ottoman Turks. The original icon was a waxed icon, an acoustic icon. And of course it's now found in the Tretyakov Gallery in Moscow. But there were 4 copies of the icon made in various mediums, either with egg tempera or with rizas or both. This icon belonged to one of those 4 families, and we pretty much have concluded it belonged to the Golitsyn family, who had a estate outside of Moscow, as well as the Stroganov family and the Narishkin family, various others. And each one of them had a copy of this icon that they kept within their estates, which were located very close to the city of Moscow. So you can see over the centuries the icon was embellished again with a newer riza, but if you look underneath, you'll actually see under this icon painted itself another icon of this, probably the original depiction. They used the original boards, painted over it again, and most likely embellished this riza maybe 4 or 5 times, because it comes off in sections. This actual piece here is the original, probably. This here is another piece of the original, and then these are 3 or 4 different added sections. The reasoning for the cross is probably adopted from the Greek custom, that when you have a miraculous icon, usually the Greeks would place medals or items on the icon to hang in thanksgiving for either their arm or their leg or their eyes or their heart that were healed by the saint that is depicted in the icon. Usually they chain them across. Of course, the Russian tradition is not to have that. However, as you can see, most likely the iconographers, or let's say the metal craftsmen, saw this and they decided to add a permanent cross. But it's very interesting is that this icon is really the way shower icon, adigitria in Greek. And she is showing the way to her crucified son in a similar way that you have the icon of "Do not lament for me, mother." So therefore this is extremely significant. The feast day for this icon is the 5th week of Lent, when you celebrate the Akafist. But also it's interesting is that's the week that we commemorate the Akafist, because we are asked the Mother of God to show us the way to her Son, to his crucifixion. So very apropos that it's that way. The icons in the center area here are gold. They're from Moscow. They're 18-karat gold and all made with pearls and seed pearls. The gospel that you see here is from the reign of Tsar Paul Petrovich Romanov from 1796 to 1801. Even though he was a Tsar for a very short period of time, many of the ecclesiastical items that have survived in the Russian church were from his period of time. It doesn't make sense, but even the crosses that the priests wear, even to this day, the archpriest cross, the gold cross, the first rank of clergy cross, all were made, the originals, during his time. This is a gospel, of course, with the Saints of America on it. As you can see, they are all the newest saints of the church. And this is, again, the altar area. You have 2 hand-carved icons made of very exotic woods from all over the world. They are hand-carved of the Kazan Mother of God, as well as the icon which was painted without hands. So this concludes the second. As you can see, the inscription says, Agios o Theos, Agios Ishiros, Agios Athanatos eleison imas. Holy God, Holy Mighty, Holy Immortal One, have mercy on us. In Greek, because of course the church language for the East is Greek, and we have it on the 3rd section in Latin. I welcome you to the center portion of the exhibition, which has been dedicated to the glory of Byzantium. You have the early church, you have the chapel area, and now you have the main part of Byzantium, but also of the Holy Roman Empire. On these 2 walls, you have some of the oldest icons and some of the oldest items here in the collection, dating back to the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th century, all the way up to the 14th century. Very unusual items from the 5th century, for example, crosses, priest crosses, triptychs and diptychs, medallions, engopians, made of solid gold that were worn by the bishops on state occasions before the Emperor of Byzantium. Crosses. They didn't wear an engopian that we wear sort of like today, where it has the image of the Mother of God. They were actually court pieces, so they would have jewels and garnets and rubies, but crosses, and those would be most important. As time went on, the engopian became usually an icon of the Mother of God. In the Russian tradition, it was known as the Panagia, but of course Panagia means Mother of God in the Greek language, so the Russians adopted the name of the icon depicted on the engopian. But an engopian was an award. It was something, a medal, a medallion that was worn for state occasions. Even the vestments, the palitsa or the epignation or the nabedrnik that we wear in the Russian and the Greek churches were actually Byzantine awards for service to the state as well as the church. You know that the flag of the Byzantine Empire, or the Eastern Roman Empire, was an eagle depicted with 2 heads. Of course, there are 2 stories. An explanation of that is that it was the state and it was the church together with one body, in the sense that it was the Holy Roman Empire. And then, of course, some always say, well, it was the one eagle looking east and looking west. Whichever way you so desire, it's very similar. But interesting to note, as you can see, I asked that we have 2 flags in this section. One is the flag of the Eastern Roman Empire of Byzantium, which depicts the eagle with the 2 heads. as I explained to you. This was the flag of the Holy Roman Empire. But then this is the flag of the Vatican. Again, what color is the basic of it? It's yellow. Yellow was the imperial color for the Holy Roman Empire. It represented the church. And it's interesting that if you look way in the back later, you'll see another flag. That's the flag of the Romanovs. And again, it's a double-headed eagle, but the background is yellow. Because, as you can see, the first Rome, the second Rome, the third Rome, all with the same yellow, because of the fact that it was a daughter of the Holy Roman Empire of Byzantium that married into the family of the Romanovs, into the Russian imperial family, and this is why the flag, the coloration actually goes right to the imperial family. In the center here you have many very beautiful icons that are carved out of cypress wood, icons that are made with mother of pearl, different mediums, but all of which are period pieces. This 5th century cross here was probably worn by a cleric. The larger one probably by a higher ranking cleric. The Engolpians in the center by a bishop who probably also had a state office besides being a bishop. It was not unheard of that a bishop was also a head of a province. For example, Cappadocia or Ephesus had bishop rulers besides civil rulers. And then you have a panagia that are here. This is a panagia of the Annunciation. And this you have a talisman, sort of like an icon that was probably used to adorn either a member of a family or even the crib of a child for protection in those days. This one here has a piece of the true cross in it, and it's made of bone, mammal bone. And this one is made, this Engolpian is made of horn, animal horn, probably antlers. In this section, you have many Coptic items. Of course, you know the church in the first few centuries, the Coptic church, the Ethiopian church, the church of Nubia, and the church of Sinai were all one. And then, of course, as the time went on, there were 7 ecumenical councils. And at one of these councils, there arose a division between those that believed in the two natures of Christ and emphasized the divine as opposed to the human. And of course, the church decided eventually that there were two natures of Christ, both human and divine. But many in the East refused to accept it and wanted to emphasize the divine nature of Christ. And therefore they became known as Monophysites. Monophysite meaning only of the one nature as opposed to the two nature. However, they were still considered Oriental and Orthodox in the sense that that was the name. So those churches flourished in Egypt, amongst the Egyptians, the Coptics. It flourished in Abyssinia, in Numidia, in the areas of present-day Ethiopia, Eritrea, parts of Somalia, the Sudan, those areas, and even towards Iraq and Lebanon and Syria. Many of these Monophysites, including even as far as India, where the Church of St. Thomas was developed, and the Malankaris Church. All these churches remained in communion with themselves in the Monophysite church. And these items that you see here are from these ancient churches of the Monophysite, mostly Coptic. There are some Ethiopian. There's a distinction between the styles. At one time, the Ethiopian and the Coptic church were one. And as centuries went on, they separated, but still keep communion with each other. And to be a Coptic, to be the Patriarch of Ethiopia, you still sit on the Holy Synod of the Patriarchate of the Coptic Church in Alexandria. But there is a connection. And then here is very unusual. It's an actual large relic of Saint Theodore Stratilatus. This is the same Theodore who in Slavonic is known as Feodor, who's actually the warrior saint who was riding through the village of Kostroma after the invasion of the Mongolians, who gave the name to that icon that you see in the center there, which I spoke about, that was in the imperial family's apartment, the Feodorovskaya Mother of God. So this is actually his relic. That's right here. This is an icon of St. Nicholas, the Wonder Worker, whose feast day on December 6th is coming up. But what's interesting is on the reverse side of this icon, which is a very old Byzantine icon, probably before the fall in 1453. The reverse side is a Dutch panel, most likely from a ship, a cabinet in a ship. And it's a panel, a wooden panel, a block panel, probably from a Renaissance scene or the like. But the wood probably to them was so insignificant, being used as a panel for a shelf or for a cabinet, that whoever was on the ship as an Orthodox decided to paint an icon of the patron saint of sailors, St. Nicholas, so that they would be protected on the ship. So this, on one side is St. Nicholas, on the reverse side is nothing but a covering to a cupboard in probably a captain's quarters on a ship. Here you have a Dalmatian cross. Dalmatian, of course, is the coast opposite of Italy, opposite of Bari, on the Yugoslavian side, on the Adriatic. And it's made with the whole life of Christ in cypress wood. The detail is magnificent, and it's studded with pearls, it's silver, and there's gold in it. And several of these have survived over the centuries, but very few in such perfect condition. So this is a very beautiful piece that we have here. And also you'll see some of the relics of some of the early saints. For example, Anthony and Theodosius of the caves of Kiev from the 1000 AD. You have saints here from the early church in the deserts, and also some of the early Coptic saints and Ethiopian saints of the church. On these walls are some of the very old Greek icons that we have. For example, this is Saint Anuphrius with the long beard, Agios Anuphri. And this is, he's always depicted in the desert, dressed with items that you find on the desert, and he dressed himself with this. You also have here Saint Haralampus, and here, this is Haralampus, and this icon is the icon of the life-giving fountain. Of course, Peter and Paul, you can't have the East without the West, so that icon depicts the East with the West, holding the church between them. And this is an icon of a stylite. A stylite means a monastic or a saint who lived on the top of a tower, stylitis. This is Saint Nikita. There are several other stylites, but this is a famous one. Of course, the archangel Michael in the Apocalypse version of him riding on a horse with his wings outstretched on a red horse. And here you have the Virgin more spacious than the heavens. The original came from Mount Athos. This is also from Mount Athos on the Holy Mountain. And various other icons of the three hierarchs, Greek icons, and this is a Ruthenian icon or Carpathian icon, most likely from the area originally from Moravia, probably, then moved to Uzhhorod, Mikhailovce. It's the three depictions of the three saints of the East, the mare-bearing women. The same depiction, if you've ever been to Hagia Sophia, you'll see the three women. It's also where they received this hymn, Fostilaron, okay, because of the fact that these are the mare-bearing women who lit the way for Christ's resurrection. And this is an unusual version from the fact that it came right from the Carpathian Mountains. And the letters are in Glagalica, much older than Old Church Slavonic. It's Glagalica. And it even has chopars that even are very hard to translate anymore. So it's a very old Byzantine, but of a Ruthenian origin. On this side you have the icon, of course, of Kimbisis Theotokos, the falling asleep of the Mother of God. This is a pre-1453 icon of the falling asleep. And then you have, of course, the joy of the life-giving fountain, which is again a very unusual depiction of the Virgin Mary within the fountain, actually the chalice, really. And the fountain represents the chalice in which we are all sanctified by the transformation of the wine into the blood and the body of Christ. Here you have St. Nicholas, and another one on this side that's very unusual is the icon of the 7 sleepers of Ephesus and the 40 martyrs of Sebaste. Very unusual depiction. So we'll proceed now to the actual building in a panorama of Hagia Sophia, the great church of the East. As you can see, this is the workers and the architects turning this monument into the greatest church that has ever existed in Christendom. Of course, you know, in 1453, the great city was invaded and the cathedral was turned into a mosque. And since now, it is now a museum. But over the centuries since the invasions, many of the icons that were formerly whitewashed are starting to peer through again. And you actually could feel and see the eyes of the saints and the bodies of the saints coming through this whitewashed interior that was happening. As of course you see a mosaic which was typical of the Greek period in which they created, and what's interesting is the light. See those lights, blasts of light? The Greeks, architects at that time, tried to portray and to bring into a cathedral natural lighting for not only the services, but even towards the time when the sun would go down. So they created these little circles and these little windows in certain spots to actually correlate to where sun would come in and how the sun would leave, in order to give it natural lighting during the course of the services. And this is very important because you can't even imagine, you can't even repeat that type of architecture today. And these are the workers who were brought in to be able to execute this most magnificent of all cathedrals. Hagia Sophia, known as Holy Wisdom, actually Saint Sophia and her 3 daughters, but dedicated to Holy Wisdom. And this is one of the icons inside the great cathedral. Of course, the Mother of God enthroned with Christ in her lap. And you could see the imperialness of it in the sense that it very much emulated the throne of one of the emperors or the empresses of Byzantium at the time. In these cases, you have various items that were worn by bishops, panagias, engolpions, crosses, reliquary crosses, all types of items that were used over the centuries from the year 900 up in this section. And on this wall you have the icon, of course, of the Synaxis of the Holy Archangels, again November 8th, and on this side the icon of Saint Paraskevi and her whole hagiography. Saint Paraskevi is Saint Friday in the church. And then you have chalices. For example, this chalice here is from the early church from the 1700s. You have the apron icons, very unusual depiction, not just a venchik or a halo, not just a riza or vestments or an aklad, a covering. You even had aprons to further embellish the Mother of God, to set her aside in a special way. And this is a hagiography icon, of course, of St. Nicholas. It's a magnificent one. And these, of course, of the archangels and the 3 saints, St. Alexander, St. Alexandra, and St. Nicholas. On this side, we have the icon of St. Nicholas of Mozhaisk. He's not the St. Nicholas, the wonder worker of Myra that you know, but of Mozhaisk, because he holds the sword in one hand and on the other a cathedral, a church. And this is the icon of the Virgin of the Burning Bush from Mount Sinai, As you know, in the services of Great Lent, especially on Holy Saturday, you hear about the angel of frost, the angel of wind, the angel of rain, and that is what this icon is depicting. So it's the icon of the burning bush. In this section you have some of the early books that we have exhibited in this collection. You have the first Romanov Gospel from 1636. This Gospel was used for the coronation of Michael Fyodorowicz Romanov. It's all handwritten inside. There's even watermarks, and there's a complete story inside. As we continue on our journey through the exhibition, I would like to point out the two icons, double-sided icons, that we have here in the center. This is the icon of the Bogolubskaya Mother of God on one side, and on the reverse side is the icon of Saint Nicholas and, of course, Saint Cosmas and Damian. Actually, this is Pantaleon, Pantaleon. What's interesting about these icons that they're double-sided, and most likely in the early days they were used as banners, or they had poles attached to the bottom parts, and they were used for various holidays. There you have the icon, also a double-sided icon, where you have there, it's the prophetess Anna, and on the reverse side is the icon of the Annunciation, again another double-sided icon. And here we have a third one, and this is the icon of basically the full year. But when we were trying to figure out how the months went, we realized that they're actually started here, and they go around each level all the way around the icon. So that's how it works. Now, behind us we have Novgorod-style icons. The center one is the icon of the Pokrov, the protection of the Most Holy Theotokos, Novgorod School. Here you have the elevation of the cross, and this one, of course, is Soshestvie v Ad, the descent into Hades, and the Epiphany, or the baptism of Christ in the River Jordan. The icon below it is the icon of the sign in Pollock School, and here we have the saints, the miracle-working saints of Kiev. In the center you have the Uspensky Cathedral, Dormition Cathedral, as it looked in the early days in the Kiev-Pecheskaya Lavra. Of course, you know the story that the cathedral was blown up during World War II. It was blamed, of course, on the approaching Nazi armies, and of course it was destroyed and has since been rebuilt. It is at the entrance to the Kiev-Pecheskaya Lavra, where many of these saints were monastics and lived and died and are buried in the catacombs. The various pieces that you see here in these little cylinders, this is the original mitre of Saint Innocent of Alaska. Here we have his original chalice from Alaska. And here, one of the icons from the Amur River region on the border of Manchuria, made with river pearls, as well as many of these are made with river pearls. This is one of the oldest chalices in the collection. It's of a 17th century. You notice the unusual shape, reminiscent of the before the Renaissance in Western Europe. But the workmanship is shaded enamel. Shaded enamel is enameling with then paint on top of it to give it an effect of actually three-dimensional effect. This is a chalice from the time of Catherine the Great, and of course this icon was the family icon of Saint Patriarch Tikhon of Moscow. It is one of the icons that was part of the Beloved family, and the Dikiri and Trikiri are the originals from Saint Tikhon's that were used by Archbishop Patriarch Tikhon. Here we have the mitre of Archbishop Dmitry Magin, who was buried in Rover Farm in New Jersey. He was a bishop who had come and fled with the retreating White Army through Harbin and eventually to Shanghai and then to the western part of the United States. In this part of the exhibition, we have some original Fabergé pieces, but what's interesting to point out is this is the original Panagia of Innocenti of Alaska, his poiuchi, his cuffs. This Panagia belonged to the Metropolitan of Ekaterinburg. You know the story about when the Tsar's family was imprisoned in Ekaterinburg. They went to the cathedral for services until the proto-deacon during the liturgy intoned the litany for the emperor and empress. Because of that, the Red Army Commission in Ekaterinburg forbade them to go anymore to the cathedral. Metropolitan Girmagen was the cathedral, was the metropolitan of the city, and they had to send a priest to a Patyev house to serve just a sluzhba, a liturgy in the house just for the family's privacy. Of course, you know, this was his Panagia, and it's very important, is because it bears the icon of St. Catherine. Next to it you have the bone and mammal bone Panagia set and icon Panagia of Innocenti of Alaska made of mammal bone. And next to it you have the moshchi, the relics of St. Alexander Nevsky, and behind that St. Maxim the Greek. These are of Chinnikov and Chlebnikov and Fabergé icons, as you can see. And this Panagia is the Panagia of Metropolite Platon Rождественский, who was a member of the Duma and became the first metropolitan here in the church in America. It's dated 1912. And these also are some of the most unusual Fabergé pieces we have in the collection. You have the moshchi here of Sergius and Herman or German of Balam Monastery. You have the relics of 6 of the most important Russian saints, Nikolai, Pitirim, Iona, all from Moscow. Here you have the moshchi of St. Innocenti of Alaska, and as you can see here, this is a very large bone from this part of the body of St. Innocenti of Irkutsk. This is his actual bone. And this set of deacon's robes belonged to the famous proto-deacon, actually archdeacon, Bolatov, who was the archdeacon for Patriarch Tikhon on his entronization as Patriarch of Moscow in the Kremlin. This is his original set. And this was sent by Nicholas II upon his coronation. This was a gift sent to the American church to be worn by the nastoyatel, the Blahochina of the cathedral in Nikolaevsky Sobor, 97th Street. And as you can see, it has the icon of St. Nicholas in the back. And this is all spun bullion. The pattern is known as chrysanthemum. And it was only sent as a gift to the dean of St. Nicholas Cathedral on 97th Street. Here you have the mitra of St. Nikolai Velimirovich of Užice, the Serbian saint, who died here in America. This is his mitra, as well as the original Dachranitelnica, or tabernacle, from the Cathedral Christos Spasitelya in Moscow. Before it was destroyed by Stalin, it was removed along with the chandeliers. Of course, you know the story, many of them were placed in the Moscow subways, but the Dachranitsa survived the destruction of the cathedral. Some of the Rostov enamel grob is still intact, and also the lower grob is still intact. Some of the other pieces have been pulled off, but actually it's still in pretty good shape. The Evangelia also comes from Christos Spasitelya. Here you have the moshchi given by the Patriarch from St. Sergius of Radonezh. You have St. Daniel of Moscow from Danielovsky Monastery, Innocenti of Veniaminov, and this is the first antimins that was sent to the church in America in 1793. It arrived 1794. It was sent from Metropolitan Gavril from St. Petersburg under the reign of the Empress Catherine the Great, and it is still with its moshchi. Inside is St. Barbara and St. Ekaterina, inside the original moshchi. This is the first moshchi that was used for the first liturgy in America. This is in the Kenti, and this work that you see here is made of dry seaweed by the Aleuts from the Aleutian chain. This is dry seaweed. And here you have the moshchi. We just received the last two of the entire royal family of passion bearers of the Russian Church. You have Nikolai II, Alexandra, and the children all now intact. So we have that. And also, this is the icon of Saint Herman, as well as his relics here. What's interesting is this is the icon that was placed on his casket when he was canonized in Kodiak. Archbishop Paul of Finland, the head of the Finnish Orthodox Church, brought this icon. It was painted by a Japanese iconographer from Tokyo who wanted it to be included in the canonization. They allowed it to be placed on the casket when they carried it around the church for the Kristni Chod. And after that, the icon disappeared for 40 years. We just received it back. It was held privately for the last 40 years, and now it's back in the church's hands. And of course, this is a reliquary with the actual body, pieces of the body of Herman, and his papuchi, you know, his slippers that the Aleuts made for him, the bottoms of his papuchi, his slippers, inside here. I'd like to thank you for coming and visiting this exhibition known as the Icon, The Way to the Kingdom. As you can see, it's a slight glimpse into the kingdom of heaven, and we thank you for allowing us to show you the way, to have the icons be a way shower. As it says, the icon of the Mother of God, Hadigitria, is a way shower to her Son, Jesus Christ. And we hope that this exhibition is not something just to look at, but it's something to come and venerate these icons, to understand that the Church has transcended all these centuries, and that the Mother of God and the icons of our Church, which have survived all types of problems and all kinds of things that have befallen them, are still with us, so that they can show us as Christians, especially, that there is a way to Jesus Christ. There is a window, indeed, through these icons to heaven. God bless you.